So, yes, usual situation. The chat's there for those of you that are new. The chat's there. Use it, make it happy, share things, introduce yourself. It's your friend, okay? You'll get the usual ramble from me for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to send you over to Ireland virtually in a very good, sustainable way by Zoom. But for those of you that haven't been to a cafe before, I am Jenny Milne, and I am the Lady of Cake, apparently. But I just want to give you a bit of an overview of the SRITC's team. Now, the Musketeers don't look like that, neither do the advisory board. But I just wanted to say to you that we have Musketeers, some of which are here today. And these are volunteers that help us out in the background with the running of SRITC. And then we have an advisory board, and I'll come back to that in a minute, because we set up the advisory board in January. SRITC became a social enterprise in 2021, so still fairly new, and we're all evolving in it, and it's not our main day jobs for any of us, and lots of volunteering time to make this happen. But also you'll see along the bottom here, we've got some great partners that we work aside that help finance some of the nitty-gritty to make things happen within SRITC. So some of them are here today, so thank you for joining in, guys, and thanks for the continued support. This is the advisory board. This is a bit of a ta-ta moment for those of you that are here, because this is the first time anybody's seen this. So our lineup is Laurie Pickup, who is our chair, and you were introduced to him in the news bulletin this week. Some of you will be familiar with Alistair McEnroy, because he's also a director of SRITC, and some of you will also probably have come across, I'm not going to go through them all, some of these characters at cafes or in different parts of your life. But we do have Magnus from Sweden, and Laurie's based in Italy. So we have quite a great range of locations as well, so we can tap into all things rural mobility. So that's our advisory board, and they're going to meet once a quarter. And they will be there to help take SRITC forward. I know there's a few of you that haven't been to a cafe and probably have no idea what SRITC is about, and you've been told to come along or something sounded really interesting about Ireland today. So I just want to share a couple of slides about where we've come from, what our vision is. And for those that are very experienced SRITC goers, they may have seen these slides before. But as you can tell, we do things slightly differently, and it's all about being supportive of one another, sharing. So what you're going to hear today will be really insightful, might give you some inspiration, and it's about that knowledge sharing and being just less excluded. I think before the pandemic started, I think we all realized that when you're in a rural location or wanting to go to a rural location, it took a lot of time out of your diaries. And that's where myself and Alex had got with the thoughts after the conventions as they were back in 2018, 2019. So we were starting to put things online, and we will always keep things online to be able to make sure that we have that inclusivity aspect, because yeah, we're going from strength to strength. And I sometimes wonder how we've managed to come so far so quickly. So 2023 aims and objectives, we're into February now, nearly March, scary, and everybody's talking about Easter, which apparently is only 6 weeks ago. So 6 weeks to go. We did some work last year, as some of you know, and announced our big asks, and we had 6 of them. We're working away beaverishly on 3 of them, and we want to deliver all 3 this year. We're hoping to also launch our network and knowledge exchange centre. So for you guys, this would mean a safe space for you to talk, communicate, share, but it will also be somewhere that you can upload any projects that you know of or involved with, so that we sort of get this library of rural mobility, because it's really lacking as a one-stop shop somewhere. So we're working on that at the moment, and hope to bring you something on that this year. And as always, we will continue to do the products that we've started to develop to try and bring in some revenue. The main one at the moment is about being involved with stakeholder engagement. I'm just going to whistle through all of these things, but I would highlight that if it's not in your diary yet, you will hear about it shortly. The Scottish Rural Parliament is taking place in November at Fort William, and as always, we'll be partnering with the delivery of that. So that will cover everything from housing, health, education and transport, and we'll be in Fort William, and we'll be giving you the date shortly as soon as SRA let us know. So lots of impact to be had. So on to today. As I said, we've been working away feverishly on one of the big asks, and in particular, that's the one relating to STEM. Now, the team will put in the chat during this cafe, if you didn't see them in the news bulletin, 2 surveys. One's designed for any of us that are not young enough to be involved in STEM, to complete, and then the other one is for younger people. So if you could please take those surveys that will be put into the chat and share them around your networks, it'd be really helpful. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, where you're based, STEM is STEM. So we're working on that with a workshop happening next month. And Matt is not with us today because he's in Orkney at a youth conference, and he'll be talking about transport. And we did realise that had I gone to do that, it would have been a bit more tricky for me to be sitting here today. So as you can see, Alex is doing the polls, and you're probably fed up of polls if you sit on Zoom, but it is a necessary evil. We need this information, please, for funders. So if you could just take the time just to click the buttons, that would be really appreciated. We're also working on our draft for Rural and Island Mobility Plan, and I know we're going to hear a bit more about Ireland on that, so I won't hold on to that. I've talked about the advisory board. And finally, I'm going to put the gathering on your radar as we start to pick up momentum on this, just to make sure that you've got your accommodation sorted, tickets sorted, or you're going hybrid and you're going to join us online, or you've got any questions. We do have the gathering at email addressed, and we are starting to ramp things up because May actually isn't that far away. I did the depressing thing of working out how many sleeps there is to go. And I'm not going to tell you how many bottles of wine I'm going to need. And I don't care what happens this time. We're not going for plan C. We are doing plan B. It is happening. So gatherings on your radar. Now, I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to share something completely different before I introduce our speaker. She's actually going to introduce herself via a video. So if the YouTube link does not work, okay, I will put it into the chat and you can all watch it yourselves. So let me go and see if this works. Can we all see it? Can I have thumbs up if we can see this? Can we hear it?
Hi everyone, my name is Deirdre and thank you for the opportunity to share our community's journey to a sustainable future. Percaghina, the Gaelic version of the Dingle Peninsula, is a popular tourist destination in the southwest. Oh, I think it's gone, is it?
Lost some sound with the pictures. No sound.
Agricultural product is not retained.
It's just buffering.
Our energy master plan for the region tells us that 54% of our
I will put it into the link, into the chat, and you can all just quickly spend 3 minutes watching this because it is a really great video. So I am just going to put it in the chat. Where's the chat box gone? Don't you love technology? Right. There you go, guys. It's all in the chat. Please press play and your own, whether you use Chrome or whatever, and I will see you back here. Just let me know when it's worked. Wave at me and say you're all done.
Or just use a reaction, whatever reaction you think is fitting.
Done.
Are we all good? We're nodding. Okay. I will hand over to Deirdre, who's going to say everything there is to know in the next 20 minutes, and then you can quiz this fountain of information. I think I love that video. And I have to say, when I was seeing the tractor towards the end, I don't know if any of you are watching Clarkson on Amazon at the moment, but it just made me think of Clarkson, because that tractor is going in a lovely straight line, something you can't do.
Thanks very much, Jenny, and thanks everyone for the invitation to join you today. The good thing about that video is, it saves me droning on for ages. It captures a lot of what is happening here on the peninsula in a very succinct way. So I will speed through this so we can get to maybe questions and answers, because I think it's in the discussion where all the real learning happens. You'll have seen a lot of this through the video here, so it has introduced the Dingle Peninsula quite well. You can see there that 54% of our energy use relates to transport, and that is what has led us, I suppose, to exploring the opportunities for rural Ireland and exploring the solutions for rural Ireland, because clearly, as you all know, that's very different to the solutions in urban areas. I'm trying to move all the images around my screen so I can move the slides here. So I'd like to start maybe by introducing ourselves as the Dingle Hub and what we are about, just to give some context as to how we fit into encouraging sustainable mobility on our peninsula. So the hub itself was established in 2017, and the mission really is to build this creative, livable, sustainable and inclusive community. And we're really an area that is very heavily dependent on tourism and low-paid seasonal jobs. So a digital hub here is a game changer for that. It allows us to build the ecosystem that will facilitate the creation and maintenance of well-paid year-round incomes here on the peninsula. And as we undertook our work to try to do this, it has led us down many paths, but in a very strategic way. We operate under 4 strategic platforms. The first being to provide, shared workspace and facilities with high quality broadband. No, thanks to my technical issues earlier, it wasn't to do with the broadband, it was to do with my laptop. But the first platform, we knew that we would never achieve the diversification of employment that we needed unless we explored building an ecosystem around it. It wasn't enough to simply provide desk and office space in a rural area. So strategic platform 2 is where we initiate many projects under 3 key areas, and that is sustainability, the digital transformation and the creative industries. We're very fortunate here in the Dingle Peninsula. We're a magnet for creative people, and embedding those people within all of the work that we are doing. I can see that there's an elevation of all of the initiatives and different ways of communicating with our communities. Under platform 3, then, it is about involving our local businesses, new startups, and creating that demand from which they can scale. And we have some lovely examples of that happening in the last year. And then strategic platform 4 is, we know that not everyone who has moved here, say throughout the pandemic, it's a beautiful area of the country. A lot of people have moved here and they've brought their employment with them. They don't all need desk and office space, but one thing they all share in common is a need for a social aspect. And so that's what the hub provides, a lot of networking events, and we center that around our key pillars as well, which is sustainability. We had a wonderful event here yesterday looking at short food supply chains. We had artists here, and we also had people working with sensor technologies for agri-tech. So that eclectic mix of people, that cross-pollination of ideas, that's how the hub works. The next slide is a duplication, but it just shows the breadth of stakeholders. I realize at an international level, maybe might not be familiar with all of these, but Enterprise Ireland, Údarás na Gaeltachta is our regional authority for Gaeltacht areas, and Kerry County Council. They would be the 3 main partners that support us. And then we have very strong partnerships for engaged research. That is a very important part of what we do. MARI there is the Marine and Renewable Energy Institute, and they've been with us since 2018. We've also received a lot of support from Science Foundation Ireland. So embedding the research and understanding that behavioural change is absolutely fundamental to the work that we are doing, because we're all about the pilot projects and the initiation, but unless you really delve in and understand what works, what didn't work, and why it didn't work, you really aren't achieving a whole pile from pilot projects. This slide just shows, on one page, the breadth, I suppose, of everything we're doing. You'll see how wide strategic platform 2 is. That's where all of our efforts are concentrated. And really, we see the impacts coming out of that. So the new businesses that are generated from strategic platform 4, it's because they have been involved in all of the different, be it, looking at anaerobic digestion, through to working with our distribution service operator, the ESB networks, on a trial project here in the peninsula, where we had, 15 electric vehicles trialed for a year, which was really wonderful. It gave a very strong understanding of the benefits of electric vehicles in a rural area, while the national narrative, or that we see in the media, might be that they're not suitable for rural areas. We now have a wealth of data from ESB networks and a wealth of experience within the community to say that's not the case, that they are, I think within the course of the year trial, all range anxiety disappeared, even though we're in the most southwesterly corner of Ireland, and it can be difficult to move around. We can dispel all of those myths, and that's a really strong foundation that we have that within the community, that knowledge base. But right through to, working with, we've many people working in film with building skills and capacity in that area and embedding that in the sustainability projects. It's all interlinked, and that creates its own ecosystem there where those businesses are emerging. We are very involved at all levels, from local right up to the international. So that's involved, as I said, we have a lot of tourism here in the area. So it's, participating on the Council for Dingle Peninsula Tourism Alliance. It's co-chairing the Destination Experience Development Plan. Within that, you're looking at e-mobility hubs for the area, because while we might be focused on maybe the local experience, it's all intertwined with the visitor experience as well, and making those two things work together. At national level, then I suppose it is what we'll be here to speak about today. It's participating with the Department of Transport on the Sustainable Mobility Pathfinder team. And it is, I suppose, looking then at international level. We are a member of the European Network of Living Labs. How we engage with the community. like yourselves. I suppose we've used a lot of digital tools. We were starting to use them before the pandemic, and of course the capacity and the skills that has increased. We had some really great fun on a journey to COP26 last year over to yourselves, where we took one of those trial electric vehicles and we travelled from Dingle to Glasgow on it, and we blogged along the way. So the feedback that we got on the ground here was that people, it was so visible, you know, nationally on the news for that week, that it was wonderful to have a local connection to it. So people really followed the journey, and it was warts and all, you know, there was parts of the journey that were not so easy to manage. I think we had the highest range on the data that ESB networks have of 720 kilometers in one day. So we're a real outlier on that piece of data. But, you know, the journey out might have had some stumbling blocks, but the journey back, you can see how it all works, right? So it's just that we're ironing out, I suppose, the systems for charging. But we were able to communicate that with the community here. I mentioned how important engaged research is to us. We have been very fortunate to partner with the team in Marai with, I suppose, cross-sectoral expertise. Really, we had cross-disciplinary expertise from energy engineering to sociology, and they have worked on the ground with us. So at all of the events that we have run, at all of the maybe studies that we have done, they have been embedded within that and taking the learnings through reflective learning. We have sat down and we have worked with them to tease through what worked, what didn't work, and the outcome is a series of learning briefs and then a series of journal papers as well. So in the early stages, we realized that the journal papers would take time, and that's why we opted for learning briefs that we could turn around, you know, in a short time frame, and we could have these briefs to inform policy. And now the journal papers are starting to come on the back of that. So each learning brief has a matching journal paper. The research team also, I suppose, went out to many stakeholders, and the first statement there is one that we're quite proud of. It said, so they would have worked with policymakers and key people from government agencies and bodies, and they would have said that 86% of them stated that engaging with us encouraged them to think differently or to change their pre-existing ideas or take action. So it's just that we are having an influence and an impact with all that we are learning here. Our starting point was an energy master plan back in 2018, and that really showed us that 54% of our energy use on the peninsula was on transport. Our emissions as well is another sector, so we concentrate very heavily on agriculture as well, but for today we'll speak about the transport. And it's very clear, you know, we're very heavily dependent on private car use, and I suppose it's an aging fleet of cars as well. They don't tend to be new cars here on the peninsula. So this figure came as no surprise, but it provides clear direction of what we need to tackle if we're to meet climate action plan targets. Where we were, that showed us in 2018 where we needed to go. So we began very quickly engaging with Local Link Kerry, which is the local, it's the service here. And it is a national service that provides, I suppose, the rural solutions, but they are solutions that are very much designed to local needs. So your national, maybe your national bus Éireann will bring you from the main towns, and they'll connect those, but it's those last miles that Local Link will fill in. And where we were before engaging with them was there was a loop west of Dingle that Bus Éireann provided services 2 days a week to that loop, large coach. And really that wasn't practical. It wasn't a benefit for anyone. Nobody could change behavior with that. You might see 5 people on that on that loop every Tuesday and Friday. So Localink began working with Bus Éireann, and they moved those two services off that loop and provided a Localink service, which was 7 days a week, from Monday to Saturday. That is 8 times a day. It's less on Sunday, although I'd go back and argue that in a tourist area, Sunday needs to be the same provision as other days. What we saw on that was an immediate uptake on the previous number. The numbers are speaking for themselves now. It's a fit for purpose service. The group in Localink, they came in here. I remember the maps spread out with all the different community groups to see what was needed, which days and why, how would services connect with each other. They worked very closely with the Bus Éireann service to make sure there was connections all met each other. So if you were coming into Dingle town, there was an onward connection and out off the peninsula as well. So it all worked very, very well. And as I said, the numbers are speaking for themselves now, but it is much more than just a transport service or a way of moving around. It is certainly addressing social isolation. We have many anecdotal comments of people who can now, you know, regularly move from west of Dingle into Dingle town, who don't have to maybe change their accommodation, who can maintain their lives in the Gaeltacht areas, which in turn feeds into, I suppose, maintaining the Irish language as well, which is very important to us here. It's also important for socioeconomic development. We'd have many businesses west of Dingle that would say they couldn't operate if their staff couldn't use that Localink service. So it's a really, really vital service. But the big message on it is the work that went into the initial design, sitting down with the community to understand the needs. That is what has been the success of it. I'm really delighted to say that on Monday, 2 electric buses will be arriving in Dingle for that service, which is going to, I suppose, create quite a stir here in the community. And at the same time, they're going to put, you know, even more services onto that as well. So increased bus numbers each day. So on the back of that, that was in place since 2018, 2019, and all the applications went in and they were approved and the service is all there now. But on the back of that, we began working with the Department of Transport this time last year, who were initiating a Sustainable Mobility Pathfinder program. And we said, you know, we really need to tackle a plan for solutions in a rural area. And so we have become the Pathfinder project for solutions for rural Ireland. And how we see this is there's, I suppose, 3 main strands. We do need to look at the public transport. We are well on our way with that, with the Localink services. So we're really building on top of that. And then it is leveraging technology as well to encourage the use of those services. We are working with the County Council now to look at bus shelters in key locations. People are going to, you all know, people are going to have to be safe. They're going to need to be dry. They're going to need access to real-time information. Those apps are coming. We can, you know, the Transport for Ireland apps are really being developed at the moment. We can put up our hands and say, well, can you put Dingle there on the list so we can evaluate how this is working in this area? If we can design the bus shelters to have solar PV and, you know, have community notice boards, not advertising notice boards on those, but something that will empower people, that can tell them, you know, your journey, your decision to take a bus journey today has this impact in our overall, you know, in our overall targets. And I don't mean to put numbers and CO2 numbers, who knows what a ton of CO2 looks like, but that you could make that information real to people so that they know they're empowered, that their decisions are making a difference. We are working with Fáilte Ireland, the National Tourism Agency, on the use on the e-mobility hubs, which would put e-bikes and e-scooters and in certain locations e-cars next to the bus next to those bus shelters as well. So this Pathfinder project is essentially integrating all of these solutions, because if we have a very simple
objective of reversing the trend towards multi-car households, you have to provide the full suite of solutions. You know, you have to have the public transport, you have to enable the multimodal piece, well, you do have to have the structural improvements to the roads, and it has to be safe for people as well. So that's a lot of work with our county council. And then layering on top of that, the Pathfinder program, I suppose, is very well structured, and it has two pieces, you know, that will look at a national level, national marketing and national evaluation. Our role then in it is to, I suppose, tailor those marketing messages to the local. For us here in Gaeltacht areas, that means, you know, sharing those messages on radio and Gaeltacht through the medium of Irish, where you're reaching the broader audience here. But on the evaluation piece, then there is, you can do the carbon emissions reductions, and we're working on the baseline surveys for that at the moment, but also the behavioural changes. That qualitative piece is so important for us, and that's where our work with Mari has come in so useful. We had a wonderful creative climate action project running last year, and they were full learning briefs on that. And within that, though it was tackling diversification on farms, you know, there's very rich material from the participants to say, we employed a sustainable, you know, policy throughout the whole project. So if our artist was traveling here, they were traveling on public transport. Every time we moved people around, we arranged buses for it. We, you know, it was very considered throughout the whole thing, but that fed on to the 10 farming participants as well. And there's a wonderful comment who said, you know, we saw the people on the project, you know, making these efforts. We saw the younger people, they included me in that, which was wonderful, but they saw the younger people using the buses, and we said, you know, maybe that's not just for pensioners, maybe this is for us too. And so we've captured that, and they're using it now, and they're using it, and I suppose they're talking to their neighbours about it, and all of a sudden you're changing the mentality around you know, the use of public transport. So our project is about integrating all of this, bringing it together and providing the full suite of solutions, so people are empowered to make the decisions to, maybe at the moment we're looking at moving towards 2, 3, 4 car households. You know, we need to reverse that trend. And this is from our original energy master plan. We have the pathways that can provide that, and we have the baseline data to show how much we can reduce our emissions, so that we can, you know, pulling in the numbers and the figures and measuring that on a yearly basis is very doable. The behavioural side of it is the one that we, you know, we really need to resource and make sure happens as well. Gurav Mila Mahaga for listening to me today. So I'm excited to start the chat on this and the questions. I know that when I spoke to Jenny before, I learned that, you know, it's not just about moving people around, it's about moving things around too. And I've been implementing that in my own daily life. So every time I do have conversations about this, I learn something new.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I'm sure there's many a person, they haven't put it into the chat, questions that the people want to ask. So if I can ask you just to put your cameras back on again, it's nice to see people, and just unmute yourself is probably the best bet. And if you don't do it, you know what I do, I pick on somebody. So I'm going to ask somebody to unmute themselves, introduce, and I've got a feeling it's Campbell because he's unmuted himself, and then we go to Dami. Go for it, Campbell.
Oh, that was fascinating, a super presentation there, and there's an awful lot that we can learn from it here. I was immediately thinking of the Rockfield Centre in Oban as a hub. It's a school that we've rehabilitated into community use. It was a primary school, and it just would lend itself to some sort of venture of that nature. So I would love a copy of the slides so I can look at them in a wee bit more detail, and maybe get a chat with you at some point about what we might be able to do in the Oban area for that. But the transport side of things too was good. I was going to ask a question. My ambition for rural networks, if you like, is to connect them, because I'm here as Scotland manager for Broadway Partners, who are the owners of Arran Broadband and Broadway Broadband. And initially what we're looking at is the Isle of Arran on the west coast here, to look at the possibility of using 5G and the ultra-fast fibre backhaul to be able to create a real-time app that would connect all the rural transport possibilities. And I wondered whether you had gone down that route at all by way of an app or something along these lines for the transport that you've arranged to Dublin and other places and your electric buses. And that looks all very exciting.
It is all very exciting. We certainly have technology solutions embedded in there. My plan for that, because it is, you know, still largely in planning stage, bar all the public transport work done, was to, you know, work and collaborate with Smart Dublin, who have developed a lot of those apps. So Alan Murphy that we mentioned earlier, they've developed a lot of those maps. So part of this project is to look at that and then see, can they be tailored for the local solutions? I think that's what we need to do. We need to see what's already out there and adapt.
So Alan, for those of you Campbell, Alan's involved in the gathering, so you'll hear from Alan at the gathering. Alan was the one that kindly put me in touch with Deirdre. So he was feeling a bit bad that he wasn't fully debriefed on all things rural. So I think he deferred. Is that not about right? Anyway, Dami, you had a question, did you not? Did you not raise your hand?
I did. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for the presentation, Deirdre. Very interesting. Had a question just out of curiosity, kind of linked to one of the last things you said about, you know, this not just being about moving people, but also moving things. I think it was on the first slide you had, what was it? Passenger transport was 54% of emissions, but agriculture was like 49%. Just out of curiosity, is there like a link between, or have you looked into, you know, the non-passenger transport side of things, especially perhaps related to moving agricultural goods? I was just curious as to, you know, you spoke a little bit about passenger transport and things you were doing there, but was keen to hear a little bit more about the other side.
Yeah, I didn't do a whole pile on the agriculture side, which is a huge focus for us as well. There's a very interesting piece on the agriculture side in that the dairy farmers here, 130 of them, came together to establish a dairy farmer, West Kerry dairy farmer, sustainable energy community. We have the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland here, and they have approximately 500 communities across the country. This was the first sectoral one where you had the you know, a sector coming together. We saw huge benefits of that because there was a common language among all of these and common measures needed at the end of it. You know, it was very similar solutions needed across all those 130 farms. What we did learn from that was that out of those farmers, 130 farmers, they were using €750,000 worth of agri-diesel per annum. And this was before diesel increased this year. That is a huge amount, and a huge market is the way that we're looking at it. I think they all took a gasp at that, not maybe realizing, and that's subvented agri-diesel. So at the same time, looking at diversification of enterprises here, we've been looking at anaerobic digestion for the peninsula, and that would address our agricultural emissions. But if we were to produce biogas from that, and if we were to use that biogas in local transport markets, that is such a double benefit. You're immediately reducing the emissions from agriculture, while at the same time reducing our emissions from transport. So, and that market was just the dairy farmers alone. It wasn't even the contractors on the peninsula who, you know, are contracted to come in to spread slurry, all that heavy machinery coming in. So there's quite a significant market there. If we can, at the same time as trying to develop an anaerobic digestion plant, if we can at the same time develop the local transport market. We did have at a festival back in November, we did bring a biogas tractor down. So that caused quite a stir amongst the farming public. And of course you're going to get the that's never going to, how are you going to fill that? You know, you're going to be up in the middle of the field, and you do have to have a mobile refueling solutions. You do have to think about all of that. But we do have a number of farmers who would be willing to dual fuel convert their tractors. It costs €4,000 to dual fuel convert. It's not a huge amount. We could do, if we could get a few farmers to, you know, show that this technology works, that it will do everything that it's needed to do, that there are huge environmental benefits to doing it. We would have them. We have a market in our safari boats here, our sea safari boats for tourists, and there's a market in truck fleets as well, and potentially the larger buses too. So that's what we're trying to progress in that area. I suppose the short answer to your question is, yes, we certainly have considered the moving around, and that at the moment that is our solution. There hasn't been a lot of government supports for anaerobic digestion in this country up to now. The mood music is certainly changing, and we are expecting to see that change. We have a full feasibility study done. We're ready to go into master planning stage. You know, we're ready as soon as the supports and the structure in this country is ready to develop an AD plant.
Fab. I know this will be a subject, and I'll come to Francesca in a minute, but for those of you that haven't come across Iona drones, Alex and I have spoken with the founder, and I've had a few conversations with him, but it piggybacks what you've just been talking about, because during lockdown, he was back home in rural France and couldn't understand why farmers were not doing Veg-Box and all the rest of it, because he's been living in London, couldn't understand why they weren't doing it. And they were like, oh, because we can't afford it. And he's like, but why can't you afford it? And they tried to explain how expensive even red diesel was, etc., to be able to do something like that, and it wasn't cost effective. He's like, but there must be a way of doing it. And then the next thing that happened was his grandmother needed some medication that was like a 30-minute drive away, and then a 30-minute drive back. And lo and behold, Iona drones got developed as a solution, because he had taken the time to go back home and then realized, actually, we need to be looking at solutions. But for farming, he was absolutely stunned at the cost of diesel. And yeah, so let's watch this space, because I think there's going to be quite a lot happening in it. Francesca, do you want to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Jenny. And yes, apologies. I have joined, a little bit, farther down the presentation, because I had a meeting to attend earlier. So my name is Francesca Cesare Pintorno, and I am a knowledge transfer manager for digital transport at Innovate UK KTN. So I'm very delighted, to be here. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really forward thinking. It's so interesting, to see that really actually, you're touching so many key aspects, of your area to provide, prosperity really, and social connectivity. Basically, my question was regarding basically the prospects of, an app. Are you considering, as well, some elements of behavioral change, to include into that?
Into an app?
Yes. Yes.
I would view, and I'm not thinking I'm right, but I would view the app as a tool to encourage behavioral change. Absolutely. But that's all they are, that they're tools. And it's about, first of all, I think the behavioral change maybe for a lot of people to even consider using such tools. That can be a big step for behavioral change here. I mean, I do see there's a very active WhatsApp group for rideshare here on the peninsula. There's over 80 people involved. There are daily messages. It's really working. You would love to see, a dedicated tool come out of the WhatsApp group, and a dedicated tool for this. I see that happening with our sports clubs here. It makes it much easier. So I would certainly like it. But I think the behavioral change step, first of all, is the piece that says first that I want to use a digital tool, or that I want to consider different ways of moving around. And for me, the piece then is capturing that what has inspired people to make those decisions, to take that first step of action. Because once you make that first step of action, we can see, and I think all the research backs it up, the first step will lead on to more and more. You do, get sucked in as you learn more about what needs to be done and do it. But it's capturing that journey, and that's where our behavioral change interests lie. And I do commend the Pathfinder program, because they have put aside dedicated budgets for that evaluation. We have fed in the work, the behavioural kind of piece that we have done with MARI to date and all the other projects, and they're certainly going to engage with them to make sure that the Pathfinder projects here have that embedded within it. Am I missing something though on the, you know, the potential for, say, an app to encourage further on behavioural change?
Well, obviously, the behaviors need to be identified as like, even just, what are, the needs and, which are, the goals you want to achieve. But considering as well what are, the main needs of the population, in that specific area. It can, yes, it can, of course, even just, the options, it's a way actually to address that behavior change, of course, knowing, as I said earlier as well, the emission, what is the quantity of emission, but also there are some interesting examples, that were run in the UK, for example, in Reading, where you had, there was like sort of, a way to gather sort of, points along the way. If you would walk or would, for example, ride a bike. So basically the way you would spend those points then was actually utilizing not local services, but actually local commercial services, so local shops. So that, was also helping, for retailers, local retailers to stay on the high street. So independent retailers, I wanted to stress, to stay on the high street. So that was actually, providing that, as well, prosperity to the ecosystem. That is an option. Then, it is it's just an example. There are various.
Now that you say it, yes, there's that opportunity for gamification. I think that's a huge opportunity once we have the technical tools in place. I did see when we had the trial of the 15 electric vehicles here, we had a WhatsApp group of the trial participants. There was that number on the car that was kilowatt hours per kilometer. And the more efficient you're driving, the lower that number was. And the more range you would get out of your car. So, I mean, there was a lot of enjoyment on those WhatsApp groups going, well, my number was whatever today, or I managed this, and who holds the record. And so, and you could see that, everyone was enthused by it. Everyone was changing their driving behavior, which has not just got environmental benefits, but getting that number down meant driving more slowly. So that has huge safety implications on our roads as well. And here we are with all these diesel cars. Getting that number down with the cost of electricity at the time, we were probably saving cents if you could even count it. But we've none of that on our diesel or petrol cars to make people drive safer or use less petrol or anything. Like, you don't have that real-time information coming back with one simple number that is, guiding you towards behavioral change. So from that perspective, I think there are huge opportunities there, and people will respond to gamification.
I'm just going to jump in there because I'm conscious of time. I've got 2 hands up, and I've also got 2 questions in the question box or the chat box. So I was going to pick on Stephen anyway because he's new to a cafe, but he's also got a vested interest. So Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, and thanks especially Deirdre for that really wonderful and very impressive presentation. Just 2 or 3 words about myself. I already put it in the chat. I'm in University College Cork, not too far away from you guys in Dingle, and I'm the Sustainable Travel Manager, or Commuter Plan Manager as my full title is here. We are just looking into a project of providing better access from the rural hinterlands of counties Cork and Kerry into the third level education and further education campuses, i.e. UCC here in Cork, but also MTU in Tralee and in Cork, and the Kerry and Cork ETBs. And just wondering how we could improve access to more sustainable travel, be that be van pooling, be that be minibuses, be that better access to public transport. You spoke about the link between local link and Bus Air, and I know there's been lots happening. We're in contact with Alan O'Connor there from Kerry Local Link and his counterpart here in Cork, David O'Brien. Really impressive, especially what you did in terms of the electric buses. I really love to learn more about the electric buses. So for instance, which make, model, which size, because in UCC we're also looking into getting one here. So Deirdre, if we could tic-tac maybe later on about this. And
I will revert to Alan for the specifications on the buses. Most certainly.
Yeah, we heard a week ago that by that morning they were just arriving in Dublin Port. Now apparently tomorrow they arrive in situ then in Dingle. So congratulations to that. I really love to see them in real life. And the other thing, if you could provide me maybe or mention who specifically or in person you were in contact in Marai about the behavioral change, because what you just said at the end now of the last question, this gamification, this kind of, yes, who scores highest on efficiency in the electric vehicles, that would be something that I would be really interested here as well, as we get more and more EVs amongst our, particularly our staff. I heard a story the other day from a staff member who said she's coming in from a room every day on an EV, and she said, oh, it really shows if you're driving slower. Yes, it gives you far longer range. To say, these are the stories that I need, and to put them out there. So behavioral change, I think, is as important as engineering on that front. And so Martin might smile. We come from the same alma mater. So thanks, Martin, for getting me in here. And just thinking of who was it? Professor Heinz, I think.
I think there's going to be another cafe here between the two of you.
All right. Okay. So cut a long story short.
This is going to run, isn't it? And then next year, you guys are going to come back and say, well, as a result of February 2023, this is what we've done. So exactly. I think that's great. And for those of you that don't know, Martin kindly introduced Stephen to SRITC. So he may not be sitting in Scotland, Martin, but you will be in May. So you'll get the chance to see him there. And you never know, Stephen, we might persuade you to come to the gathering in person in May. Right, running out of time, 2 minutes left. Azrael's there. Azrael, do you want to quickly ask your question? I'm not going to ask you to talk about the combination of goods and the role of goods in Japan, because we could be here until 12 o'clock. But do you want to just quickly ask your question that's in the chat?
Yeah, just nothing really important. Just quickly, I was kind of curious about where the money is coming from and how much was it, because I think it's kind of important to see if there's like some sort of like, if it's heavily dependent on some European Union funds, for example, or if there's any plan for continuation beyond public funding.
Okay, and is that for the Dingle Hub or the Pathfinder project?
I mean, for the whole, whichever you know better. I think the hub makes more sense.
We have pulled funding from everywhere. My life at the moment evolves around, accessing funding where we need it. So we have been supported by Enterprise Ireland because we are a digital hub initially. Some supports from Kerry County Council and Uder Osnagoilta, but the vast majority from Enterprise Ireland. We are working very closely with the Department of Transport, the Department of Rural and Community Development and Enterprise Ireland to try to establish a cross-departmental scheme that hubs or groups like ourselves could access. We're delivering for Enterprise Ireland, we're delivering on the enterprise space, we are delivering for our rural future for the Department of Rural and Community Development. We are delivering on the climate action plan for the Department of Transport and the Department of Art. So we need that cross-departmental funding, because otherwise it's a drain on resources. I have a very small team here and we're constantly looking for, and the funds are already there. What we're saying is just realign them better so that we can have some sort of security for 3 to 5 years. But to answer your question, Enterprise Ireland have really supported the core and have been very supportive of us, although they're really only interested in about a quarter of what we are doing, and which is a dodgy position for us. But then Science Foundation Ireland have had some fantastic funds, but that has been our link with Marai that has accessed those funds for us. We have European Union funds for some of the agriculture projects and some SEAI funds, Science the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So we have pulled from a variety of sources, and we have worked with corporate bodies as well and drawn that in. But, you know, part of me says, you know, last year was spent making sure that I had the funds to keep the team on the road, you know, 75% of my time. Imagine if 75% of my time could be spent doing the stuff that I really want to get done on the ground, you know, and you had the core funding piece sorted. So we are pushing policymakers, we are engaging at very high levels to get this message out there, to make it easier for other groups, because, you know, it's been 5 years building to this. We don't have another 5 years for others to come and do this type of stuff. We have to make it easy. We are being listened to, but it just takes time for these things to filter through into the system. I hope that answers your question now.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm sure Sharon would have a question if we had longer, but I'm going to ask Terry and Angus to ask both their questions simultaneously. Well, not at the same time, obviously, just because conscious of time. Terry, can you put your question, and then Angus, and then hopefully Deirdre can summarise that one.
Hello. As director of the Scottish Islands Federation, I recognise the west coast of Ireland as being a kind of a peer in terms of geographic remoteness and problems of sparsity of population. I would love us to be a digital hub on the west coast of Scotland, and it may be possible in places, but that's contingent on digital connectivity, which I had to drop out of this meeting for 15 minutes because of that shortcoming. And the other issue that comes up in a tourism economy is housing. Did you have to address the housing problem as a precondition for your growth into a digital hub?
Right, Angus, go for your question, and then you can answer both of them.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
Mine's actually more just a very quick comment based on the gamification idea. I spent some time in Gothenburg a couple of years ago in Sweden, in the town, neighborhood called Landala, and they had a initiative where the community is almost like a competition between the small neighborhoods of their recycling efforts, and basically the better the community performed, the more access they had to funding, and the community got points that they could use for voting and things like this. I just wonder whether that concept could be applied to EV and like the collective emissions of a community in some way, and you could gamify that at some kind of level.
Yeah, that you get a higher ranking as you achieve. I suppose you just have to have the monitoring systems in place then. When you say community, how do you define, you know, and how do you standardize it? I'm sure it could be done though, but I do think it is the way to drive behavioral change. So, you know, it's worth, as what we are saying is put these mechanisms in place, let them be competitive, let them access, but you know, you have to deliver on all of these. But it's a you know, cross-departmental approach to do it. The gamification piece could be, have you achieved certain levels, you know, along the way, and then you can motivate people to reach different levels, to say, yes, well, there'll be this access to funding to do it. So I could definitely see the potential in that. And to go back to the previous question as well, clearly, you know, we are a peer on the edge of our countries. When you say accommodation, that is a serious challenge for us here on the peninsula as well, you know, especially since COVID. There was always some you know, short-term lets that we could work with the owners and say, well, are you interested? Are you moving towards a long-term let? And if people were moving around, we'd find something. But since COVID, all that has been mopped up. There is so little accommodation. There is some legislation being enforced now around Airbnb, which might free up a little more. But the cost of accommodation for our smaller businesses trying to house staff, you know, it is closing smaller businesses for us if they can't access chefs. Say our chefs want to come and move their families, or at least highly trained chefs. That in turn feeds into our local food supply chains, short food supply chains. If you don't have well-trained chefs who are willing to come and move here and can move there and afford to, you're not going to have them encouraging the short food supply chains. So yeah, accommodation, it's not something that I have taken on my brief. It is huge. It's a big challenge for the area, most certainly.
Fab. I really appreciate everybody staying on, but I also really appreciate the fact that you've come along today to talk about the Dingle Hub. And there's so much in Ireland that's happening that I can see a session 2 or session 3, and we are discussing a bit of it at the gathering as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time and going through the stress with the laptop before we started off. By the way, folks, I wasn't starting to panic, honestly. We might have ended up having our own version of Ireland on a cafe today, with you coming along later on. Anyway, just some concluding remarks just before we all disappear off. A reminder about the STEM surveys that are in the chat, and that, as I say, the workshop will be happening. Alex has put in the chat as well that our March Cafe will be about rural health and mobility. This is taking from some competitions that have been running on this exact theme, and we're also going to be tapping into a Highland project that is being run by Rory Watt with young people that aren't necessarily able to be at mainstream education. And a reminder that our rural transport awards are open, and obviously Alex has put something up about the gathering, and that we are still in the midst of submitting a whole load of different consultations to the UK government, because there's lots going on at the moment. So that's a whiz bang tour. Thank you very much for joining us. If Deirdre wants to stay on along with the team, that would be great. But we will be able to share the slides, won't we? So we'll send that out, and then there'll be the recording as well. And for those of you that are new to SRITC, welcome. I hope you survived. For those of you that didn't get a chance to speak, there's always next time. Right, okie dokie, folks. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Could I just make a quick